Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The latest cybersecurity executive order sets some new standards and direction, but it also goes back and makes changes to Biden-era executive orders. If you didn't take a red pen to the previous versions, you might miss some of the important details. Fortunately, my next guest did do the markup. Here with practical discussions of what these changes mean for government contractors is partner in the governmental practice at Shepherd Mullins, Washington, D.C. office, Townsend Bourne. Ms. Bourne, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, you have had a couple of weeks now, along with the rest of the government contracting space, to sort out this recent president's executive order on cybersecurity. Give us your key takeaways.
Thank you. Yes. So this executive order, as you mentioned, we've had some time to digest it. We've been through the different sections. As I mentioned in the article that our team wrote, this executive order that came out on June 6th by itself doesn't impose any particular new requirements, but it includes deletions and updates to prior executive orders. So what our team did was basically redlined a Biden executive order that came out in January that's now being amended by this new executive order. So by doing that, we're able to see exactly what's deleted, what's updated, what's been added. So here we've got a new policy statement from the Trump administration on an approach to cybersecurity. So as you can imagine, it does point out some of the key cybersecurity risks as they see it, some of the countries that are the largest threats to the U.S. right now in terms of cyber. So I'd say kind of the new overarching policy statement, some of the cuts are fairly significant. I think we'll probably go into a little more detail on those, but the one I see as probably most significant for federal government contractors relates to requirements for third-party software security and what that means for contractors in terms of meeting particular security requirements and attesting to compliance with those particular security requirements. In some of the other sections, we do see some updates regarding deadlines for revisions to certain key standards and publications that form guidance for federal government contractors. So we are always keeping an eye on those. What those changes look like and any guidance accompanying those standards is always helpful. We do see in terms of AI and some of the other large topic areas that we've been following, there's some minor changes. There are also some different focus areas in those spaces. The article that we wrote really focuses on anticipated updates to the federal acquisition regulations and what those might look like for contractors, but realizing this executive order does go more broadly than that. It does talk about federal agency initiatives with regard to AI and some other topic areas of interest.
Well, that's a really great overview. Let's dig back into some of the specifics that you mentioned, and let's start with the supply chain security, especially for software providers. Tell us a little bit more about the specifics there. What are the changes that you notice?
This one is fairly complicated just because of the history. So I know we've covered that on previous iterations of this show, so I'll go over it really quickly. But there was an executive order that came out in 2021 that actually set forth some requirements for securing third-party software supply chain, making sure that NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, had a timeline for developing a standard on this issue, as well as certain guidance documents on this issue. So that's been underway now for over 4 years. This executive order that came out on June 6th updates provisions from the Biden executive order that came out this past January relating to CISA's role in collecting secure software attestations from industry and some of the other aspects of that process. So where we currently stand under that executive order from January 2021, there is an open federal acquisition regulation case right now that says eventually there should be a FAR regulation coming out that would require federal contractors to meet the Secure Software Development Framework, which is a NIST publication, and also provide attestations of compliance with that standard. So that's currently still an open FAR case. What the Biden executive order in January 2025 did was add to that requirement, and it mentioned more of a role for CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, in collecting those attestations and participating, being kind of overseeing some of that effort. Some of the changes in the executive order from a couple weeks ago strike out certain sections relating to third-party software security. So they actually do still show that we're going to be getting updates to NIST Secure Software Development Framework and reliance on NIST as the entity that will be updating and responsible for those security standards. But it's looking like, based on the updates, there may be some changes to how software attestations might be collected. Right now, there's a form that's being used for those, and there's a repository managed by CISA for those. It's possible that could change based on some of these amendments in the executive order.
I'm speaking with Townsend Bourne. She's a partner in the governmental practice at Shepard Mullins, Washington, D.C. office. So much to still watch for between the executive order and the development of the new FAR.
I think that's right. We're always tracking the Open FAR and DFAR's case reports, which are updated almost every week. So those are usually available updates on Fridays. So we track those, and then in conjunction, other agency initiatives and executive orders that might impact what goes into those Open FAR case reports.
You also mentioned some changes around the use of AI and quantum computing in cybersecurity. So fill us in on those details.
Sure. So some of the provisions of the Biden January 2025 executive order are struck in this new executive order that came out a couple weeks ago. With respect to AI, there's still language about enhancing cyber defense through AI, which is a kind of a consistent policy initiative, but the language changes a bit. And the other update on AI relates to a mandate for agencies to incorporate into their existing vulnerability management processes AI software. So tracking incidents, incident response, and sharing indicators of compromise about AI systems throughout the federal government. So managing that process a little bit more is an initiative that's spelled out in the new executive order as well.
And does it say who will collect that data and do that analysis?
It does not. It talks about agency sharing of that data. So I think the idea is it would be worked into existing processes that agencies have for sharing some of that information, like IOCs.
Got it. So the changes seem somewhat at the margins of the processes and not so much at the middle. But if you were a government contractor now, what should you be watching for? What changes should you be making in your own practices to better prepare for all of these new directions?
It's a great question. So we get inquiries all the time, as you can imagine, from clients when new executive orders come out. What should we be looking for? What should we be doing? So I think it's a good reminder that executive orders generally dictate actions for executive agencies to take. They don't impose immediate regulations or obligations on companies as a general matter. So what we look for in terms of counseling our clients, most of whom are in the federal government contracting space, are some of these broader policy initiatives, or, for example, the AI vulnerability management issue, kind of how might that be rolled out to companies in the future through various memoranda or guidance or regulations. We also look at, in each of these cybersecurity executive orders that have come out over the years, there are mandates for the FAR Council to get recommendations on language to update the FAR from various agencies and then take steps to actually amend the FAR. So that's what we've kind of focused on, and then we track those through the Open FAR case report. So in this executive order that came out recently, The kind of new FAR implications relate to software supply chain security. So that open FAR case that's existing, we'll be looking pretty closely to see how that changes or if that goes away potentially and another one replaces it. The executive order from the beginning of June leaves intact some of the provisions from the earlier Biden executive order that call for updates to the FAR. So those are still part of this new executive order, and those relate to initiatives to update cybersecurity requirements based on civil space contracts, so contracts relating to the space industry. We may see some FAR updates there. There's also some provisions in the executive order about cybersecurity for internet service providers, so securing internet routing technology and communications relating to the federal government. There also is a provision that will require in the FAR at some point that companies that provide consumer Internet of Things technology have what's being called the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark, which is a label that the U.S. government's rolling out as a cybersecurity kind of guarantee so that consumers can see certain Internet of Things products have met particular cybersecurity standards. So that will be a big one, I think, that will impact a lot of companies that are producing Internet of Things technology. So a lot here. And like you said, some of it is a bit on the fringes or it's not quite as developed within the executive order, so we follow that. But where these executive orders call for particular updates to the FAR, that's where we really hone in, and we're watching that open FAR case report to see things as they're added, and then as the dates progress, when we might actually see a proposed regulation and when requirements might actually start flowing into federal government contracts.
I've been speaking with Townsend Bourne. She's a partner in the governmental practice at Shepard Mullins, Washington, D.C. office. Thanks so much for joining me with that really practical distillation of what could be a really complicated read.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
We'll post this interview and a link to her article at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.